This is the Western Obsessions TV podcast, where hunting's not a hobby, it's an obsession. All right, guys, welcome back to the Western Obsessions TV podcast. This episode is brought to you by Ready Nutrition. Optimize your performance in the gym and in the outdoors. Live ready. My guest today is Ben Dziwulski. You like how I practiced your last name before you came on, Ben?
I'm very proud of you.
Did I get it right?
You don't practice many things, but the fact that you practice my last name makes me happy.
I don't practice many things. Guys, Ben is on today. Ben owns a company called Wad Prep, all about helping people do CrossFit better, RX your workouts better. Super cool guy. Just got into hunting a few years ago. I've been like taking him under my wing a little bit, showing some things. He's been showing me some things of what not to do. So sometimes I do things the wrong way. Right? I don't say the wrong way. I do them my way, which is probably not the right way. But
Kurt's special way. And hey, it works well for you. Look at the wall behind you, man.
Yeah, I mean, I still get some stuff done. Just because guys say you have to do it this way doesn't mean it has to be done that way. It might be more effective that way, but like if you got your own way, do it, right? And I'm testament to that. Ben, man, you started hunting a couple of years ago. Tell me about that barrier of entry to get into hunting. How's that?
That's definitely a very real thing. So the reason I got into hunting is because one of my best friends, his name is Gary. He moved out to Colorado a few years before I moved here. And he was telling me about this new hobby he got into, which was archery elk hunting. He hadn't killed one yet, but he was like, you have to try it with me. It's unbelievable. You're going to love it. And of course, I'm like, roll my eyes, kind of like, all right, Gary, whatever. At the time, this is 4 years ago, I've been a semi-pro fisherman in the past. Like I used to be a shark fishing guide. I used to fish really competitively on the bass tour, but hunting was never a thing that I was very, interested in. My view of hunting was just like, I don't know, you're killing animals for a trophy. Like I don't understand it. And what's cool is that Gary, because I had this trusted friend, he was able to like explain to me how hunting actually is the number one preserver of land in, at least I know, the United States, probably the world. And went on to tell me about like all the actual like positive benefits of hunting, both for the animals and for natural resources, land management, stuff like that. And I was intrigued. I'm like, all right, that's interesting. And eventually he was able to convince me he's like, you have to do it. I held out for a couple of years in Colorado, and then I eventually was like, all right, I'll do it. Tell me what to buy. And I bought a bow and, started shooting and bought all the gear, and I had to, get him to send me all these gear lists. But when I was getting into it, I felt so stupid because as someone who had done zero hunting ever, like you're talking about, like I've never even, I don't know. I've never hunted a white-tailed deer. I've never done anything. Never hunted a duck. I literally have no idea what I'm doing coming into what's like one of the hardest versions of hunting, backcountry elk hunting with a bow. And I still remember going to the bow shop, and like I showed up there and I'm like, hey guys, like I'm a beginner. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I have this list of stuff that my buddy Gary, my hunting partner, says that I should get. And of course they're like, all right, like not necessarily extremely bubbly and happy to see me, probably because I pulled up in my Tesla, and and then they, I proceeded to get some help from a guy, but anytime they'd ask me like a question, like how many grains do you want in your arrows? I'm like, I don't even know what that means, guys. So let me ask Gary, like, whatever would potentially kill an elk, I guess. What kind of sight do you want? A 3-pin slider, 5-pin? Like, I'm like, I don't know what that means either, guys. So I'm just going to ask Gary. And then I remember like the third question that they should have known that I don't know the answer to. I was basically looking for their guidance too, and which they kind of weren't really willing to give. Eventually, I still remember the I was like, they asked me another question. They're like, what kind of, do you want a stabilizer on it? I'm like, I don't know. Like, let me ask Gary. And the guy's like, is Gary going to pull the bow back for you too and shoot it? And I'm just like, and this was like in front of a bunch of people. And I'm just like demoralized. So
Yeah.
long story long, the learning curve to get into hunting, I'd say was it was challenging and it was a little scary. Like I have enough self confidence, or I can take one on the chin. I can be made fun of by a guy in the bow shop, and it's not going to bother me too much. But I definitely realized that like it's kind of daunting, especially for someone that doesn't have a mentor of some sort to help teach them the ropes and explain to them the various terminologies and the things. It'd be very, very difficult for someone to have any confidence to know what they're doing and to get started. So luckily, Gary was able to help me get into it. And then really early on, Kurt, a friend of a friend introduced me to you, or one of our mutual friends introduced me to you, and we hit it off and had a great year of hunting. And I learned a lot from you. So without those two mentors, man, it would have been really difficult to even follow through all the way and start hunting. Like I think there's a lot of macho man ego that, especially when a guy is trying to get into hunting, it makes it really challenging. Now, if I was a very attractive young blonde girl and went into that bow shop, I have a feeling I would have had stellar treatment. But it was very interesting to get the it was hard to get started, but now that I'm through all that, like I'm on the other side, and I have a lot more confidence, and I kind of have a slight inkling of what I'm doing. But for beginner hunters in general, man, it's tough. There's so much terminology. There's so many rules. I still don't know how the tags and bonus point system really work. I don't think anyone does. Like it's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah, dude, man. And, I'm calling this adult onset hunting, right? Like you didn't grow
Yeah,
up with it as a kid, and that's where most people learn hunting is through their family growing up. And,
right.
and there's a lot more guys that are in your situation, and I'll definitely get into that. But man, I want to go back to this bow shop. And that sucks, man. And that's a big negative, the part of this industry is there's a lot of ego in the industry. And a new guy coming in wanting to spend money in their business, and not just spend a little bit of money, you're ready to drop a lot of money. You needed everything, right?
Yeah.
For them to treat you that way. That's one. I know the bow shop you're talking about. That's one of the reasons why I don't go back there anymore, because of a few of those incidences. But which is a big problem of the industry, man. Like, I think the hunting world in general, we need new hunters into the industry to help fund and fuel the conservation of our sport, right? So
Mhm.
you guys like you are super important, and it sucks, man, that you had that experience. But it's a good thing you found a good guy like me to help you out.
Yeah, you've always been too nice to me, Kurt. You've been so nice.
I know I'm just too nice of a guy. No, 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 no. And here's what I'm gonna do real quick, Ben. You've actually, like, since I met you, I remember I was talking about a little bit of business stuff, because you're into business stuff, I'm into business stuff, and we wrap on that quite a bit too. Since I met you, you have given me the idea and the inspiration to start a company called Hunt Mentor. I'm still getting it off the ground, but like, you know, there's a lot of business mentors out there that will say, pick your, you know, reverse engineer your absolute favorite, or your client, right? Like imagine your client, who that is, down to a T, and then base your company based upon your dream client. You are the person I have based this company off of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the low IQ, high ego, uh, Tesla driving Denverite. Is that it?
Yeah, that's no. It's the adult onset person getting
Yeah.
into hunting that just, man, the barrier of entry is enormous. And even Western, like you went from like not knowing anything in hunting and going into the absolute hardest part of hunting is Western backpack archery
Mhm.
elk hunting. That's like the hardest. So like that barrier of entry is enormous.
And loved every second of it, and still my first season actually I had a shot opportunity, and I did miss it, or I did hit it in the front shoulder blade and it didn't do anything because I was using the wrong broadhead. Anyway, but still, just the fact like got out there and got to experience it. I still remember, um, Yeah, like when I heard my first bugle in the woods, I turned to Gary and I was just like, I'm gonna do this the rest of my life. Like this is the most incredible thing I've ever done. And I've won a lot of money fishing. I've had a lot of very adrenaline filled stuff in my life. But that was the cream of the crop. And I still, you know, I still am just super thankful for having people like you, Kurt, and having Gary and having some other people who were able to get me into it and let me ask the stupid questions. And now I can say with confidence, I will be unavailable all September until the day I die.
That's right, man. So let me ask you this. Why did you choose bow hunting over shotgun, rifle, muzzleloader, all the different types of hunting you can do? Why'd you choose
Yeah.
bow hunting?
So honestly, it was probably because Gary, that's what he chose was bow hunting, and he's similar to me, like hadn't done much hunting, and then just kind of learned it all himself, and made a ton of mistakes his first few seasons, and he was like, September is the best. Like you got to do September, and it's archery season, and it's awesome. And he probably heard it on like Joe Rogan, right? Like that's probably what he probably heard it on the Rogan podcast, and then that's what made him do it. So realistically, that's why. But I always tend to, I don't know, like I always tend to do the most challenging version of things. I very rarely start with like, oh, let's just try this like beginner, version of something, and then we'll eventually make it hard. It's like, no, I like to go all in with everything that I do, whether that's like the equipment that I buy or the you know the level of difficulty that I try to enter into. I always tend to try the harder version of everything. So that's why bow hunting.
Do you think that leads you to some disappointment and rejection and stuff like that? Not
Oh
just in
yeah.
like hunting, but like in life too, maybe, huh?
I mean, probably. But also there's like an extreme satisfaction if you do it the hard way. But I I mean, certainly in the elk woods and in all of the woods, right? Bow hunting has made it very difficult. Like I've just because of doing archery, I've missed white-tailed deer because my arrow hit a branch. If it was a shotgun or a rifle, not a problem. I've had shot opportunities on turkeys that I still have not killed a turkey with the bow. And I've had shot opportunities where if I was using a shotgun, I'd have a bird down for sure. So there's a lot of I could be successful, but for me, it's like I think in order to become if I want to become a really good hunter, I think that having a bow in my hand makes it so that I have to become a really good hunter to get the shot opportunities to, actually put an animal on the ground. And then that's just going to make all the other hunting easy. Cause like I did go rifle elk hunting this year in third rifle season. Or maybe it was fourth. I think it was fourth. Anyway, over Thanksgiving, had a cow tag and I filled it, right?
Right.
Kind of, I mean, it was hard, but it was like, wow, that's a lot easier when you can shoot 350 yards. Um,
Yeah.
but I have a feeling that starting the hard way and going through the tough challenge of failed, eating tag soup, as they say, that's going to, when I start filling tags more consistently, that's going to be something that's going to make it easier across the board. The rifle hunts will be easier. The bow hunting, I'll have more feathers in my cap, things like that.
Yeah. And I'm with you too, man. I really enjoy the difficult hunts, the challenging hunts. I do both. I do rifle, shotgun, bow. And I almost gave up my bow last year. I think I text you like right after. I'm like, I'm selling all my archery equipment, buy all my shit. I'm done hunting because I hit a nice bull with my bow and I didn't recover it. And I know like if I had a muzzleloader or a rifle, he would probably have been dead within yards. But like
Yeah.
it's not like the disappointment of my failure. It was more of I wounded that animal and maybe it's fatal, maybe it's not
Right.
because I was using archery equipment. And I'll take that a step further. And, you know, obviously I didn't hit him perfect or, that could go back to me practicing more with my bow. Right. But
Hmm.
anyway, it's much more difficult. And I do like the challenge where there's sometimes I'm like, it's so frustrating that I'm like, just give me a gun.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I think, Kurt, if if I'm not mistaken, I think we're bringing one bow and one rifle to Alaska this year. So
that's right.
I'm I'm excited that you'll have my insurance policy.
Yeah. And what Ben is talking about, we're going on a cool hunt together. We're going to Attic Island, in Alaska for a caribou hunt, which is my first caribou hunt, my first time in Alaska. I think your first too,
Same.
right? Yeah. And I'm super pumped about it, even though I know the weather's going to be terrible, rainy, windy, but we'll get through it.
As long as we set our expectations really low with the weather, I'm
Yeah.
not expecting to see any caribou and I'm not expecting to have any sun.
Yeah.
So, with those expectations,
If we get sunlight and see a caribou, man, we're going to have a blast.
yep, yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's kind of your journey into hunting. Where do you think this is going to take you? Like, I know it's kind of hard to know and say, but in your mind right now, where do you see hunting for the next 5, 10, 15 years for you?
Hmm. It's a good question. I have a feeling. So with you, Kurt, I've tried out several different aspects of hunting, right? Like I've gone on a bear hunt in Canada, which is over bait. We've gone to Hawaii, which is beautiful and sunny, and there's just deer everywhere. Axis deer. I've done hog hunting. I've done all kinds of stuff. I realized that I over the next 10 to 15 years, I'm probably going to narrow down my scope of what kind of hunting I really like. I much prefer spot and stalk, boots on the ground hunting over stand hunting. So that kind of eliminates, like, I don't think I'll ever hunt bear over bait again. I don't think I'm ever going to hunt hogs over bait again because it just, like, I don't know, it just feels weird. Like, especially the bears, they're not even scared of you. They look at you and then right? So, like, I just didn't feel like
They don't
hunting
know what
that
you are.
much,
Yeah.
right? So doing stuff over bait is probably not ideal. I'm sure there might be some scenarios where it's valid or something that, I would be okay doing. But I really like boots on the ground, archery hunting, or just backcountry hunting in general. Like, the rifle hunt that I did was frustrating, but that's because of how many people were around and because it wasn't in the backcountry. It was like on the side of the road essentially. But I think anything that gets me like out into the woods is something that I really like. And then I'll probably just refine my hunting and like realize that there's a few hunts I really like. Obviously, elk hunting in September is certainly number one for me right now. There's probably going to be some other ones that I try out, whether it's um, like Sika deer on the eastern shore of Maryland, where I'm from, is an interesting one to me. Really starting to get on whitetail and like pattern them. I realized that doing that with a tree stand is something that you do, but I loved having my like little self climber. And I like went into the woods, picked out a tree, climbed the tree, and then literally got to the top, turned around, there's my buck, and I shot it with my bow. Like that was awesome because that
Yeah.
felt like it was very much DIY to me. I I feel like I'm just going to keep trying out different hunts. Probably go on some fancy trips with you, just like this caribou hunt. I don't necessarily see myself doing that every year, but every few years, visiting somewhere new and trying a really cool hunt, like red stag would be awesome. But I think what's cool, the reason I'm so attracted to hunting is like the reason I was attracted to fishing, and the reason I like CrossFit is like it takes a lot of time to become a master, and the only way to become a master at it is to spend time in the woods. Like the only way to become a master fisherman is to spend time on the water. The only way to be good at CrossFit is to do a lot of CrossFit workouts.
Mhm.
And I've kind of mastered the CrossFit. I've been doing CrossFit for 15 years now, which is crazy. Um, it's like half of my life, almost half my life, and I've been fishing for way longer than that. And I've mastered certain aspects of that. So I'm excited to have something completely new to me, completely foreign, and already in just this coming up on my third year, already it's I can see like that learning curve getting faster, and I can see myself picking up some cues. Like things that I learned on one hunt I can apply to a different hunt, and I'm like really starting to put together this puzzle, and eventually I'm gonna hopefully become a master hunter, and that excites me because the only way to do it, the satisfaction that comes with becoming a master of something, um, you have to do the hard work to get there. So
Yeah, and it's not only do you have to do the hard work and be in the woods in especially elk woods, but you need to be in game too. Because I know guys that have hunted for 30 years every year, but have never really been in game that often. And they're not even close to being an expert hunter because they haven't been in that situation of
yeah.
trying to get a shot off on an animal. And that's,
And that was what was really cool about this past year elk season. Like, in fishing, like doing fishing tournaments all over the map, there was like there's some tournaments where you get information, right? Like you're legally, you're allowed to like talk to other people, and like I would have some connections and then get some info on a lake, and they'd be like, "Oh, go to this spot, throw this lure, it's great." And then sometimes you do it and it would work, and it was cool. But man, there's something about just like finding them on your own. Some of the biggest tournaments that I won in the fishing industry or in bass fishing were tournaments where I found them. Where like I had a theory, I went out, I found them, figured out what lure they were biting, and I dominated. And that was really, really cool. So it was awesome this past elk season with no info. I just kind of went out there I had some I did a lot of studying on like elk patterns and learned from some people like during the day they do this and during the evening they do this, and I went out and I found a ton of elk. And even you, Kurt, when you came out with me, they were acting weird, but you're like, dude, there are so many bulls here.
yeah.
And it was really cool because we stayed on elk all of September. Yeah, we being beginner hunters, we missed a lot of opportunities, a lot of opportunities. My buddy Gary and I, too many, and it's very sad thinking about it. But the amount of animals that we were around, I was very special. So I agree with you there. Like you have to be able to get on them, and man, it feels awesome when you have a theory, you find them, and you get on them all by yourself without having a guide say, "Yep, they're right over there." It feels awesome.
Yeah, man, I'm with you 100% because I do guided hunts, and the reason why I do them, I trade them out a lot of times with some of the business stuff that I do, but because I like to go on a lot of adventures, but it's just not the same when you're on a guided hunt and you're handheld a little bit, and they're saying, "Hey, here's where the animals usually are. Let's go see," and they're glassing, they're helping. It's fun, but it's not the same of doing it on your own, like picking a spot out within thousands and thousands of acres in the mountains to say, all right, I'm going to go up here and see if I can figure this out. And when you find them like you did, man, it's just more rewarding that way.
Yeah.
Do you think, all right, so like obviously people have been hunting in these mountains for centuries. Do you think there's a spot out there that's not been discovered? Let's just take Colorado.
Yes, 100%.
You think so? Oh man, I want
Because
to believe that.
because with just like with fishing, right? Like technically every square inch of the lake probably has been fished, right? Kind of. But due to pressure and due to just changing weather patterns, snowpack, like there are sweet spots that exist every single year. I would assume, just like there are on the lake, there are sweet spots that exist that people do not find. Like there are elk paradise that, for whatever reason, maybe the year before someone was there and they weren't there, but then this year they'll be loaded there. So I think it's like on a year by year basis. Yeah, there's a whole pile of elk that people don't find. There is a honey hole that exists. Like I always say, they're biting somewhere, right on the lake. And I think that they're bugling somewhere, and they're there. It's just about you don't really know where that's going to be, and that's like the beauty of hunting is like you might have like what's interesting is like I'm excited to go back to the spot that I found last year, but I'm also like kind of worried. I'm like so worried I'm going to get back there. There's going to be no elk, and I'm going to be like, I'm ruined. Like I'm lost. Because like you remember me telling you, I was like, hey man, I found a herd of 35 legal bulls, and you're like, huh? Like
Yeah.
what? I was like, I swear, dude, I counted every single individual elk, every single individual bull, with my spotting scope, and there were 35 of them. And you're like, that's kind of crazy, but they won't
Like,
be there.
what elk preserve were you on?
Yeah. There was a gate that said like no trespassing elk farm. Did you think that had
Yeah.
anything to do with it? Kidding, everyone, kidding. This was OTC public land. Um, but yeah, I think there are some honey holes, there's sweet spots, and what's so funny is like you will never know how close you got to them, right? Like there was some stuff last year that I found where I'm like, I have never seen so much elk sign in my entire life. Like, do you remember actually hiking the backside of that one bowl? And
Yeah.
it was like the gnarliest hike ever. Like, what would we have done if we shot something back there? Like, I have no idea. We would have just
Good.
stayed back there. But it was like an elk highway. It's like every square inch was beaten down with fresh elk tracks. It's like, all right, at some point, this was the money spot. We just missed it.
Yeah.
Really interesting stuff.
Yeah. Because I have this fantasy, right? And it's a fantasy that there's places out there that no one's ever been, and it's just loaded with beautiful big bull elk. They're bugling and zero pressure. They haven't seen humans. And I know it's more of a fantasy, but like I think this year, me, you, maybe Brad, I think our goal this year should be to like find that fantasy spot. And in my head, it's like the most remote
Right. It's
spot ever.
28 miles in the backcountry.
Yeah, like you can't get there without a helicopter or something. That in my head, that's the spot, right?
Yeah. It's funny. At the elk shape camp I was on, Mark Livesey, he has like an e-scouting course that he has Tree Line Academy, and he in explaining in like demonstrating how to find elk spots, he showed us one of those spots, Kurt. He's like, look, I found this spot, and I'm not afraid to show it to you guys because it's 19 miles, or maybe it's 36 miles deep or something like that.
Holy cow.
And he's like, and you can see here, we got these chain meadows, we got these, bowls, like everything's perfect. And I want you to look at something. And he zooms in, and there's elk all over the Google Maps image. There are literally elk. Like you can see them with like
Like
you can
ants.
see the elk from the satellite imagery. And it was elk paradise. So they exist out there. They
Exist.
exist.
Yeah, we should find that this year, but let's segue a little bit, man. You're super into fitness. You've had Ben's very successful with his online coaching business called Wad Prep. Let's talk about fitness, man, and talk about your business and kind of how that may correlate into hunting a little bit. How do you
Yeah.
start?
So I started with one of my high school teachers told me about this crazy workout routine he had started with crazy pull-ups called CrossFit. And I tried it out. This was back in 2008. I tried it out, tried my first workout, threw up everywhere because I obviously chugged a giant protein smoothie right before working out, like all bodybuilders, should do. And I just remember like looking at the scores that other people had submitted on the website, like their times for how fast they got the workout done. And I was just like, what? There's people that are 10 years older than me that are beating me in this workout. Like, this is ridiculous. So I got hooked, and then eventually started coaching in college. And then when I graduated college, started my own CrossFit gym called Blue Crab CrossFit in Maryland, which still exists. There's 2 locations today. And I eventually sold that, got married, moved to Japan because she was in the military. She was a helicopter pilot for the US Navy. Moved to Japan, and then in that move, kind of came up with this idea of like, man, other people teach things on the internet. Maybe I can teach CrossFit on the internet and make a business of it. And just keeping my head down and grinding for those first several years, eventually it turned into what I would call a real business. And now today I have, 15 contractors, employees, depending on, which person it is working for me. And we have customers all across the world, and it's been great. And what's cool for me, that not necessarily related to the business side of things, but because I've done CrossFit this whole time, it was really awesome to be able to, like, a lot of people need to train very hard for backcountry elk hunting, right? I didn't. I just did my normal stuff, and I was able to get in the elk woods and put in a ton of mileage. Like
Right.
last year, we did 314 miles or something like that over the course of the month of September and a little bit of August scouting. So all those miles carrying a heavy backpack. Um, there's no way I would have been able to do that without my CrossFit training. So it's cool that CrossFit has prepared me to do the hardest version of other things like backcountry elk hunting.
Yeah, and I do CrossFit too, and that's my preferred fitness method. And but I will say that no matter, a CrossFit workout on average is what, 13, 14 minutes on average, depending on what type of workout, right?
Yeah, of actual exertion, probably.
Yeah, I mean it's an hour long if you do skill and strength, and then you do your metcon.
Right.
Um, so for me, it doesn't correlate a lot into the elk woods physically. It
Hmm.
does because okay, I'm in shape, my body has built muscle, and I have some endurance. I
Right.
can do that. But if a lot of days, man, I'm hiking for most of the day. So I'm spending 8 hours a day working out, carrying a
Hmm.
pack. Where CrossFit correlates very well for me into the elk woods is the mental toughness.
Hmm.
Yeah. So like not to quit on a workout, push through the workout, that mental toughness you build, that's where it correlates for me in the Elkwood, especially when you're on day like, I don't know, 9 and it's been raining on you for 3 days and you haven't seen an elk for 4. Like you want to like, fuck this, I'm going home, I quit, right? But like that mental toughness will keep you in the field. And that's what it's
Yeah,
about, being in the field. The longer you be in the field, the more
100%.
success. Yeah.
CrossFit CrossFit does a great job of exposing you to suffering 5 times a week if you do it 5 times a week. Right. And that's that's it. Like that's the carryover. Yeah, having the muscle and being strong but like I'm not doing weighted backpack step ups. I'm not going for long rucks. Like, yeah, I can do all that, but honestly, that shit kind of beats up your body. CrossFit doesn't beat up my body very much because I do it intelligently. But like I'm gonna go to the gym at 1:30 today, and I will suffer today. It will be pain. Like there will be a moment today where I want to quit, and I won't, and I hope I won't. I won't, and I'm going to keep grinding, and I'm going to get done, and I'm going to feel really good after. And what's so cool is that every time I expose myself to that, it carries over to doing hard things elsewhere. So, backcountry elk hunting, the amount of times Gary and I said to each other last season, like, we're doing this voluntarily, right? Like sending it up a ravine and like walking. Oh my gosh, Kurt, remember when you and I walked through Deadfall for like,
Yeah.
however many hours, just like the deadest of Deadfall. Like there was 8 different layers of pine trees stacked on top of each other, and we're like poking ourselves and falling and just miserable.
Miserable.
And
Yeah.
we're just like, we're doing this voluntarily. We tell people this is fun. The only way we can get through that and not quit is how often we expose ourselves to mental stress and come out the other side unscathed, or at least we conquer it, and that's the carryover to the Elkwoods, 100%.
Yeah. And with that being said, I kind of look at there's a big wave of archery backpack elk hunters. I think because of Joe Rogan's podcast or Cam Haines or
Hmm.
someone wanting to get into hunting, that's the coolest, perceivably coolest hunt, right? Is the archery elk hunt. But
Right.
a lot of people are not equipped for that. And that's probably not where they should start. You're different, man, because you had the mental toughness and that's just who you are as your character to like, I'm going all in. I don't give a shit if I don't kill anything for 5 years. That's what I want to do. But I think most people starting in hunting, that's probably not where they should start just because they don't have the physical capability, they don't have the mental toughness, and you don't see success right away, and you're not going to enjoy that hunt. A lot of people won't. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah. I agree. um my I would say hunting, the way I would suggest people, like if you're trying to get into hunting and you're trying to, or maybe even like if you're trying to introduce someone else to hunting, I think there's a lot of people maybe listening who like they really want to get their son or their daughter into it, or they want a friend to try it out with them. um Unless it's a very unique case like Gary did to me, where we shit, we thrive on misery together. He's a CrossFitter too. Like we thrive on that and love it. The way I would introduce people to hunting or even try it myself if I was a normal human being is the same thing I would say about fitness. You need to find something, like if you want to have a fitness habit and fall in love with fitness, you need to find something that kind of scratches the itch of having fun. Because if you introduce someone to fitness and it's just misery all the time, they're not going to want to do it, right? Unless they think that it helps them with something else. So with hunting, like when you're trying to get your children into it, when you're trying to get your friends into it, your family into it, you should probably start with something that gets you around animals, puts you in the red zone, so to speak, pretty quickly and pretty often. It's just like my dad got me into fishing. Guess what? My dad didn't get me into fishing by taking me on an offshore tuna trip where you basically just sit in and troll for 8 hours to get maybe one bite, right? Instead, what he did is he took me to a pond that was loaded with bluegill, and we absolutely whacked them, right? Like we
Mhm.
crushed them. And we did that a bunch. And then eventually I remember, oh my gosh, what is this thing? And it was a bass. And then that was like, oh my, this is so much cooler than bluegill. Right. So like I got introduced to something that I got a lot of practice reps, I got a lot of fun. And then eventually like that introduced me to the next level. And then it turned into like full blown bass fishing tournament obsession where I could go 3 days without a bite and still be like, I'm gonna catch them, like so I think doing that with hunting would be something like I've heard from multiple people like pheasant hunts, amazing, right? Or hunting with dogs, basically like bird hunting where you get a lot of shot opportunities. You can practice, not panicking when you pull the trigger, but even if you do, it's not a big deal because you'll just miss and then you can shoot the next one that flies by, right? Those kinds of opportunities, like if I was introduced to hunting that way as a kid, yeah, I probably would have fallen in love with hunting and not tortured myself with the bow for 3 years to start. Um, so I think there's a lot of validity in that. But then there's a large contingent of people that are probably similar to me, where it's like, hey man, if I want to do it, I want to do it. I want to do it right. And I put that in air quote because I don't think this is right or wrong. But if I'm going to do it, I want to do it like I'm all in. What's the most all in way to do this? It's like, well,
Yeah,
archery. I guess I could have gone more hardcore and started with a trad bow.
that's
Thankfully,
true.
I didn't. But it was archery and backcountry OTC elk, right? Like not even we're not paying for a special unit. We're not getting any guides. Let's just start with the hardest thing imaginable and work our way up from there. And that excites me. I really like that.
Yeah, for sure. For me, if I wanted someone to enjoy hunting, I take them turkey hunting because they get I know I'm
Terrible
looking at
idea.
you right
I
now.
hate turkey so much. Everyone, I just got back from a 6 day turkey hunting trip back to Maryland, where that high school teacher that actually introduced me to CrossFit, he is at one point was a professional turkey hunting guide, and then he's like, "We are on more gobblers this year than we ever have been before." And sure enough, when I get there, nope, not a bird in 6 days. Or we saw birds, but didn't have any shot opportunities. So, and obviously, I've traveled to the depths of Mexico and not killed any birds. So I disagree. Turkey hunting sucks.
Ben, you've had a different, definitely a anomaly of an experience with turkey, but typically, and I'm coming from the Midwest where the turkeys are pretty plentiful and you have private farms, and we grew up on a farm there. And you take them out in the woods and you hear the gobble, first light gobbles, and it gets excited. And you can see the birds strutting around, and usually your shot, like you get a higher chance of getting a shot. It's still not super high, but like higher than you would if you're out elk hunting with a bow or, doing something that are more difficult. But that usually is my gateway into hunting for people. But yeah, you've had definitely a different experience with turkey.
Yeah. But I would say another gateway would be, I mean, like, shoot, a state like Maryland. I had no idea how amazing the hunting was out there. But like in Maryland, most counties have unlimited doe tags,
Hmm.
which means you can shoot as many does as you want, because that's how terribly overpopulated the deer are. So I don't think I went on a single sit last year, or maybe only one sit where I didn't have a shot opportunity on a doe, right? So like that would be a great opportunity, especially if someone trying to get more reps in the red zone for archery, going on like a hog hunt in the Midwest where there's hogs everywhere, or going on, a doe hunt or just a whitetail deer hunt, and obviously not hold out for a buck, but shoot a doe. There's a lot of places where you can get a lot of shot opportunities with kind of whatever weapon you're trying to get those opportunities with. Because that's the only way, like the only way you're going to learn how to not punch the trigger. Yeah, you can practice a lot on the 3D target, but until there's a live animal that's moving around and you start panicking, you're not going to know how you handle yourself in those situations. So the more reps you can get, the better.
Yep, agreed. And that's a good point. Yeah, overpopulated states with does. That'd be a great gateway also. So at this point, man, you've been hunting for 2 years. Has it been 2 or 3?
Yep.
2
Last year was my second elk season, so
This will be 3.
this will be my third.
What would you say is your most memorable hunting moment to this point?
Oh man, that's tough.
There's probably a few of them.
There's a few really good ones, but man, the number one was I called in. So Gary and I were about halfway through the season. I think it was like maybe 13th or 14th of September. Halfway through the season, we had found this herd elk that was kind of like close to some private land. But we knew they were coming on public every day. They would like feed on private, and then the rest of the day they're on public. But it's all about like where on the public are they going. So we got in on them, and it's like, zero dark 30 in the morning. That sun's starting to creep up, and then I start letting out some calls, and I get this bull fired up, and I still remember like I'm calling, and I'm like, it's getting closer, right? Like I'm doing some cow calls, stuff like that, and he's responding, trying to get me to come over to him. And then I let out a challenge bugle, and he loses his mind. And it's foggy, like super dense fog, no wind. Gary's in his position. I'm, back a little bit a ways, and I'm like hearing this bull, and I'm like, it's getting closer. So I just kind of like peek my head out, and I kid you not, like out of some National Geographic, there is a bull, 5x5 at least, coming, walking directly towards me, slowly, just like step, step, step in the fog. And it just like, I see it's very faintly when I'm looking to start, and then it just slowly gets more and more clear. And he's coming right towards me, and he's like, 150 yards out, coming through the fog, bugling his face off. And I just go like, oh my God. And I just go hide and keep my calling sequence going, and I'm raking, I'm doing some cow calls. I'm bugling over top of him, and he's freaking pissed. And he comes in on a freaking string. So he's probably 500, 600 yards away, comes into a string. And then Gary, I didn't see it happen, but Gary, we've talked about this a couple times. I didn't see it happen, but we had this like, basically like if you drew a straight line between me and that bull, there was a very clear path kind of like through some brush that we thought this bull was going to come through, because we kind of talked about it before I separated and started calling. So this bull comes in, goes behind no shot opportunities because there was a bunch of bushes. Gary was kind of like behind some bushes. This bull kind of comes into this like bush line and then disappears. And then, if he continues coming on that string that he was on and the very clear, obvious path, he would have been 9 yards for Gary. Maybe probably less, actually. So Gary goes full draw, and that bull keeps coming. And then Gary's a full draw, like waiting for this bull to pop out, and then he hears the bull behind him. So the bull basically starts barking, not at him, but at me behind him. And so what am I doing? I'm barking back. I'm, barking back, and the bull's freaking angry. He's like, no, show me you, like, show yourself. And I'm raking, and I'm, getting all pissy. So this bull is up behind Gary. So Gary's at full draw, and then he hears the bull bark behind him, and he's just like, I can't let off, right? Because, realistically, we hadn't practiced let offs that much. You practice, you draw, you shoot. So he's like, I don't even know how jerky the let off is going to be because it's pretty hard for him. Um, and so he just starts turning. So he's a full draw, takes like probably like 45 seconds to turn all the way around, and finally gets eyes on this bull. And the bull's kind of up on the hill, and now the bull's kind of like looking like, what is that bush doing? You know, like what's going on there? And so Gary turns all the way around. There's still a bush in the way of his shot, so he has to like lean back, and then without ranging, estimates about 40 yards, shoots, misses, or let's just say doesn't connect where he wants it to. And then that bull kind of like scatters off, turns back around, keeps calling to me, and then Gary knocks another arrow, and then the bull kind of like moves off a little bit more, and then is at 70 yards, and Gary draws, and then the bull spooks off, so he didn't shoot. Um, so that was the most memorable thing because I called in this bull. Turns out it was not 40 yards, it was 23 yards.
Oh,
That's the shot that he had broadside on this bull and missed because he thought I was at 40. So we think he shot over its back or just kind of hit no man's land, and the bull's fine because he ran off like he was totally fine. So that was the most memorable elk story was calling that bull in. Like that was the first time I got into a bugling match with a bull and like called him in on a string. And what's crazy is there's another bull behind him that actually kind of spooked off because of all the commotion. But I called in two bulls, but that one called him all the way in. He probably got to about 12 yards, but was just behind cover. Ended up at 20, 23 or 24, maybe was what we ranged it at. And yeah, unfortunately, Gary was not prepared for that shot. What we learned is always range in a full 360 around you, right? Because he was expecting the bull to go this way, so he ranged a few things in front of him, but didn't range what would happen if that bull zigged instead of zagging, and he zigged and ended up behind him, and he didn't shoot accurately. So that was that.
I will say anytime that I've screwed up a shot, it's 9 times out of 10, I screwed up the range. Either I misranged something or I didn't range something and I misguessed on the range. So that's usually where I screw up. But man, that's a good story, dude. I could like visualize seeing that elk come through the fog.
Dude,
That's a good story.
it was crazy. It will never like it's in my mind. Like it was like from a movie. It was from a movie. Just this stoic bull just walking slowly, and then like I'm literally looking for like where I think I see something. I'm like, oh, and it just gets more and more clear as it just keeps coming through the fog. It was crazy.
That's
So of course I'm on cloud nine. Gary's on cloud zero, right?
yeah.
Because he can't believe he missed. He's just like, like he was really really banged up from that. And of course I'm just like, I can't believe I called it a bull to so close. So that was a crazy time. And then of course I missed my opportunity late on the final day of the season. But man, it was what a season. We had some stories that I'll never forget, and I'm excited to get back out there.
Yeah, it makes me want to run out there right now and start
Yeah.
bugling,
I got
but
two cameras that have been that I just forgot to get. So I got two cameras. The Bears have probably destroyed them by now, but we'll see.
the batteries are dead.
Yeah, well, the batteries are definitely dead.
um, but yeah, man, like with that season and even with that moment, you can't quantify how much you learned in that moment messing with that bull. Like that's where you learn the most is through that calling sequence, the shot sequence. You just learn so much by doing that over and over and over again. That's what makes you a good hunter.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's recap or not recap. Let's put a cap on this podcast with one final question to you. Since you are a newer hunter, looks like you've broken through the barrier where you're starting to figure things out a little bit. You're getting some more confident in hunting. Let my listeners know what's advice would you give to someone that was in your shoes that might want to do what you're doing now? Is there any good advice? Maybe like your top 3.
I mean, number one is find a mentor, right? Find a hunting mentor that can answer the stupid questions that you have about how the heck do you get a tag, right? Like, there's all these questions you're going to ask. Where should I camp? What should I, just all these questions. Find a hunting mentor of some sort, and even if you don't find one, like let's say Kurt launches his idea and runs it. That's a great thing. But there's probably also a lot of people in your life or someone you know or someone at the local shop. They could just be like, hey, I'm a beginner. Can I, you know, can I pay you to help me? Or can I do some work? Can I mow your lawn? Can I like do something, give them value, and then ask in return that they help you with your hunting experience, because there is no quicker way to shortcut your learning curve than to learn from someone else who has already done it, especially if you can learn from a master. That is the quickest and easiest way to shorten your learning curve. So I'd say that. Number two, be a student of the game. There are amazing online courses that you can take. Joel Turner, my buddy Joel, who I've met a few times, he has a archery course that teaches you how to shoot without punching the trigger or without getting shot panic. There's Mark Livesey's course that talks about how to e-scout for elk, so how you can find elky areas from your computer using the internet and Google Maps. Dan Staten is another guy that I know, and that's all he does is teach people how to get in shape for elk season and how to find and kill elk, right? So like there's a lot of resources online. I'm sure there's just as many resources for whitetail deer, for turkey hunting. Like there's resources all over the internet. And if you can't find any, just go to YouTube. There's probably someone like me running a business teaching people how to do hunting in the in the hunting space that you're trying to get into. So that would be number two. And then number three, I would say set your expectations or redefine your definition of success, right? If your definition of success is putting an animal down, you are doomed to be depressed. And I've gone through this. There's a couple of times where the only like a hunt equal or a successful hunt equals putting an animal down. But if you were to look at me and say, were you successful in 2022 elk season? Absolutely. The amount of legal bulls that we had within 100 yards of us, the amount of bugling we got into, the amount of time I got to spend with my best friend in the woods, like 100% successful season, even though I didn't have the meat at the end of the season. I had an amazingly successful season. So I'd just say, be very honest with yourself on what defines success and make sure that it's not just putting an animal down, because that's going to make hunting so much more enjoyable for you.
Man, that last point is a really good point. And it's really hard because when people are watching hunting content, they're just seeing people
right.
big.
Yeah, everyone's putting trophy animals down in 2 days.
And people that don't hunt, they just think that's what it is. Oh, you just go out for a couple hours and you kill a big animal, and that's what hunting is. Like, nope, that's not the reality. And I find myself wrapped up in that too, where I'm like, okay, I'm trying to be successful, and I see all my peers being quote air quotes successful on Instagram and YouTube, and if I am not, I'm like, fuck, I suck, or what am I doing wrong, or whatever.
Like I remember you telling me that like you almost felt like that's what maybe pressured you to, I don't know if it was to shoot too soon or take a tough shot on that bull, because you're like, this is my chance. Mm-hmm. I'm a hunting guide. I need to put this bull down, right? Like, and whether you did or didn't, it's just like, yeah, that pressure of like, what are other people going to think of me? You don't want that, shouldn't play any factor into your hunting season, right? You shouldn't be worked up about like, man, what am I going to post on Instagram to explain my failure? Or what am I going to, like I got to get this shot so I can show people how successful of a hunter I am. It's like, no, do cool stuff. Tell no one, right? I think I'm going to get a shirt made with that. Do cool shit. Tell no one.
Tell no one about it. I like it, man. 3 great points, Ben. And I like the last one. Well, they're all very good. The last one's really good. So
thanks.
All right, guys, this was the Western Obsessions TV podcast. You are listening to Ben Dziwulski with Wad Prep, and I'm your host, Kurt Belding. Thanks for listening, and I appreciate each and every one of you.
Peace.
This is the Western Obsessions TV podcast, where hunting's not a hobby, it's an obsession.